Apple's next iPhone release may be just a few months away, which kind of surprises a lot of people because we're not used to iPhone SEs coming out just 2 years after each other. But in today's video, we're talking about what to expect with the third generation iPhone SE and why it's probably gonna be terrible. Let's begin. The iPhone SE 3 is going to be the next victim of Apple's 5G overkill marketing. You guys know your boy is not a huge fan of 5G just because it came out too soon, our battery lives were not built for it, and it was often advertised as giving gigabit speeds, when in reality they were providing speeds slightly better than LTE, and I've even run into the circumstance many times where LTE was actually faster than 5G and allowed for better battery life. So yeah, your boy's not a huge fan of it, but what we're hearing so far from more and more supply chains and more rumors are brewing about this next generation version of the SE, which is not a design change. I hate to burst your bubble so early, but so many of you I know are well aware that you just want the iPhone 11 design, but to be made cheaper, because that way the lineup would look more uniform. We wouldn't have Touch ID on any of the new iPhones anymore, and you could finally get like a $400 iPhone that still has Face ID and still has gesture control. But the thing is, I think Apple knows how well that would sell, and they're well aware that as soon as they start making sub $500 iPhones with notches and with Face ID, that's going to quickly cannibalize the rest of the entire iPhone lineup, because the number of people that are actually willing to spend the extra money just to have an additional camera or an OLED display or tiny differences that don't make that big a difference for the average consumer who's just like, I want an iPhone, is the screen pretty big? That's like 80% of their market. In fact, I'm already surprised that they're willing to sell the iPhone 11 for $500. That's getting pretty dang low, and Apple doesn't disclose their sales numbers anymore, but I have to imagine the iPhone 11 is still probably selling really, really well. So the iPhone SE in the lineup, as annoying as it is for people that the design doesn't change much and it's still very dated looking, it kind of has to be. That's the only way it can kind of coexist with the rest of the iPhone lineup, and it sounds like the big emphasis on this third generation SE is going to be a new CPU, so they're going to put the A15 chip into the cheapest iPhone, just like the A13 chip was the best iPhone CPU of that time, and it allowed for portrait mode to come to the iPhone 8 design. But what exactly will the A15 chip allow for on the iPhone 8 design? That's a better question. I was hoping for something like night mode to now come to the iPhone, but according to Apple's own logic, it needs some kind of focus pixels for that to work, which the iPhone 8 hardware doesn't necessarily have. Maybe they're planning to upgrade that alongside it, but no one is suggesting that. That's pure speculation on my part. So my guess is it still won't have night mode, but it will have, you know, better longevity thanks to that chip, and now it, of course, 5G modem, so you can expect Apple to go crazy about the 5G talk all over again. But the reason I think this might be the worst upgrade yet for the iPhone SE line is not because I think the A15 chip is objectively slower than the A13. It's not that 5G is objectively slower than LTE. I know that technically this will be using, you know, the most advanced silicon Apple's ever made, but I'm just saying upgrade over upgrade. This will feel the most minor, partly because it's only been 2 years since the last special edition iPhone, but also because there's no talk of Apple upping the battery capacity with this next generation SE, which in my view is a huge oversight and going to cause major problems, because already people notice with 5G, especially on iPhones with smaller batteries like the 12 mini or the 13 mini, you don't have to be using it very long for it to quickly drain through that whole battery capacity, and that's going to be a problem with the iPhone SE because it statistically has the smallest battery within the entire lineup. Even though, yes, it's physically larger than the 12 mini and 13 mini, the physical capacity of the SE is under 2000 milliamp hours. So it's already not a great battery life with 4G, and in its current state, 5G does not help with battery life at all. It on average consumes far more power than LTE does. So the fact that they're going to be piggybacking this 5G hype train onto the SE and likely not doing much with the battery, at least as far as all these production reports are talking about, no one has said that the battery capacity is increasing. Maybe the A15 chip power efficiency helps out a little bit, but it's probably not going to help much. And if that were the case, I would have expected some kind of battery life increase from the iPhone 8, which had the A11 chip, and the iPhone SE 2nd gen, which had the A13 chip, but at least according to Apple's website, battery life is the same on both of those iPhones. Not even in the audio playback and standby time sections. They used the exact same battery, and I don't think that's going to be any different with the the SE3. So my point is, its biggest selling point, its biggest feature that Apple brags about all the time is just gonna be, wow, look, you can finally get 5G on a $400 iPhone. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that amazing? And yet it's probably going to nuke your battery life so bad you'll have to turn it off to actually get through the day on a charge. Maybe another piece of secret sauce they might slide in there is MagSafe support, because the iPhone SE footprint is technically larger than the 12 mini and 13 mini, which means if this next generation SE supported MagSafe, you could slap a stupid MagSafe battery pack on the back and Apple could be like, haha, we have solved the problem. If you're concerned about 5G consuming too much battery, just spend $100 on our special proprietary battery bank, and then the iPhone will be good. It'll be bulky, it'll look kind of ugly, but it will technically get you through the day. But once again, that's speculation on my part. No rumor, no analyst has suggested MagSafe is coming to the SE3. I just feel like that's one of those dated options that they have since added to most of the new iPhones. So if there is a new one coming out, I don't think that's going to be restricted as a Pro feature. But yeah, still expect Lightning, still expect the home button, Touch ID, no changes with the display, 4.7 inches LCD. And I know this isn't what people want. I know you have a big laundry list of features. You're like, I want the next generation iPhone SE to have OLED, 120 Hz, USB-C, 9 cameras on the back, and LiDAR on the front for no reason. But the thing is, every time you guys suggest something that's going to add to the overall cost, Apple has certain profit margins they require on all of their devices, and they're not willing to sell things at a massive loss like other Android companies are that are able to buy, you know, OLED displays and decent cameras for the $300 and $400 devices. The biggest emphasis on the SE is not about the hardware being impressive. It's always just about like the chip being future-proofed so that people who want an iPhone and they don't care about the bells and whistles, they just want iMessage, FaceTime, and some people, yes, even prefer Touch ID and the home button. They just want that with the iOS ecosystem, and they want to get it as cheap as possible, and of course they want to hold on to it for as long as possible. So as much as someone may say, you know, this Pixel 5a is a better deal and you can get much more out of that, it's kind of catering towards a completely different market of people that care about the size of the display, the battery life, the cameras, but they don't prioritize as much the CPU, the longevity, and the ecosystem that the iPhone SE has to offer. So I know that the price points are similar, but the target demographic is so drastically different that I still believe there is a purpose in the lineup for the iPhone SE. I just think that the SE3 specifically, as much as we're hearing about it, sounds incredibly boring and also not that great a product to recommend, because people who just want an iPhone so that they can be in the ecosystem and have iMessage, are they the type of person that needs or cares about 5G? I really don't think they should, despite what carriers may encourage them to spend their money on. But we should know more about this iPhone by the end of March, because that's when most people are saying it should be announced. And I'm actually more interested to see what gets announced alongside the iPhone SE3, because this gives me hope that there will be a March event next year that will have, you know, iMac Pro refresh, new AirPods Pro, potentially iPad Air 5 maybe, and all of those are far more interesting to me than the iPhone SE3. But needless to say, we should probably expect some announcements in the spring for Apple next year. What do you guys think of the SE3 rumors? Do you think they're all wrong and Apple's planning something drastically different for this special edition iPhone, and yet it'll be really affordable and cannibalize the rest of the lineup? Or do you have a brain? Feel free to let me know in the comments below. This is your Apple Sheep here. I'll see you guys in the next one.